And we are go.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be discussing Game Theory Part 2 today. And partly because there were several topics that occurred to us after the talk that we wanted to include. And one of those in particular is the idea of a zero-sum game and a positive-sum game. And then I guess also game theory in general, which is technically a branch of mathematics where people study like moves and strategies and probabilities. And the most famous of those is the prisoner's dilemma.
Right.
And the way the prisoner's dilemma works is imagine there are two prisoners. Imagine Johnny and I are prisoners, and we're both sentenced, and the authorities come to me and say, hey, if you rat out your brother, we'll give you a lessened sentence. And then they give him the same deal, like, hey, if you rat out your brother, we'll give you a lessened sentence. And then it gets a little trickier, because if I say, oh, I'm innocent, but he rats me out, it's actually worse for me, and vice versa. If I rat him out and he claims to be innocent, it's worse for him. But if we both claim to be innocent, then we both get a lighter sentence or no sentence. So it's this it's a game, because, you make your choice. Am I going to say innocent or guilty? And then, what are they going to do? Are they going to collaborate with you? Are they going to mess you over?
I think, on top of that, most of the ones I've seen too, if we both stab each other in the back, then we have an increased sentence from baseline.
Right.
So if we're cooperate and we trust each other, on net, there's we each do 2 years or something. If you stab each other in the back, one gets off scot-free, the other one's 7 years.
Yeah.
Right. So you can do out the numbers to where, depending on the benefits and the costs, there's actually an optimal strategy that can be thought out if you have other parameters around that.
Yeah. And then there are other versions of the game where you go through iterations. So we play around, and I trust you and you stab me in the back, and then we're going to go through another round. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah. Right. There's actually these fun interactive simulations you can get online, and you can choose to be someone who's always nice, or you can choose to be a backstabber, or you can choose to be a chaos, where it just you'll just randomly choose one, and then they do this iteration over a million cycles, and they see who takes over the landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which strategy wins out?
And my understanding is it's called modified tit for tat. Have you heard about this?
So I've heard tit for tat, which strangely has become that is the most efficient strategy for this kind of situation that's been discovered, right?
Yeah. And so modified tit for tat is, if they hurt you, you hurt them back, and then you're good. So there's no long-term grudges. It's just
right. And if they're nice to you, then you'll be nice back.
So you always start out being nice, and then if they hurt you, you hurt them back, and that's it. And then you're nice again. That's modified tit for tat.
Okay, because the one I've heard is because you don't know, right? It's kind of you flip your cards up at the same time.
Yeah.
So first you're nice, and then if they're nice, then you just continue being nice off into eternity, and hey, that's great.
That's right.
But if they backstab you, then you backstab them back, and then you're always going to be backstabbing until they do something. That was my understanding of tit for tat. So once they've backstabbed you, next round is you're in a backstab.
Yes.
And
just once.
I think you continue depending on what they do.
Well, maybe that's the modified tit for tat.
Okay. And then let's say they backstab again.
So then you're
just going to do whatever they did previously.
That's exactly right.
That's it.
Yep.
So then if they're nice, then you're going to be nice to the next round, even though you may have backstabbed them from the previous round.
That's right. So you have you don't hold a grudge or hold a memory. You communicate that you're going to mirror whatever they do.
Right.
And then hopefully they'll say, oh, if they're going to mirror whatever I do, that means if I operate in good faith, they'll operate in good faith, and then things get better for everybody.
You know what's ironic now that I'm actually thinking about this? This sounds a lot like the golden rule.
Yeah.
Right? And if you have that strategy and you're playing against someone who's doing that, it's oh, I should just treat this person how I want to be treated
Next round,
because
yeah.
they're going to treat me exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Mathematical support for golden rule.
Yeah, and and that goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of like this embedded ethic. So maybe that being played out over, millions of iterations, it's got like embedded into our DNA, literally.
Yeah, right.
So the other concept is this zero sum game versus a positive sum game.
Mm-hmm.
So a zero sum game is a game where people have an objective and somebody wins and somebody loses. And you could think about something like the presidency of the United States, right? Somebody wins, somebody loses. And so this is also sometimes called a scarcity mindset, right? That there's only one person, so if I'm going to win, you're going to have to lose. And the scarcity mindset or zero sum mindset also gets people into this like revenge and ultra competition that's usually not very healthy, and it's also not sustainable, right? It's not something that's going to endure in the long run. And then a positive sum game is this idea where I'm going to play a game where you benefit and then you play a game where I benefit, and then we both mutually prosper from the game.
So how would that look like? A positive sum game?
Well, ideally, that's what a business does, right? So the business makes money, and the employees make money, and everyone's gaining more skills that they can make more money in the future.
And the consumer's purchasing something that they benefit from as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So it's not like different games; it's the same game, but it's positive, meaning everyone gets what they want.
Yeah, and so some games, and this is a really important distinction. Some games are structured as zero sum games, and some games are structured as positive sum games. But there's also this idea of mindset. So you could be in a zero sum game thinking it's a win-win situation, right? You're thinking it's positive sum, but you're actually being parasitized and taken advantage of. And the opposite's also true. You might be participating in a positive sum game, but you might think, oh, I'm a victim. They're abusing me. They're taking advantage of me. So you have this like zero sum mindset, even though the game itself is positive sum.
Well, then the question is, when you're playing these zero sum or positive sum games, and to differentiate the mindset versus the actual structure of the game.
Right.
The structure, also the duration of the game, is also interesting to take into account. Like I know Amazon, for example, is a huge company, wildly doing well, but they are in it for this really long game, right? And they've made like all sorts of they've been taking hits for years and years and years. So they probably lost a lot in the early game, but if you actually, it depends how. I guess what I'm saying, the length of the game matters depending on if it's zero sum or positive sum.
Right, or even like iterations too. So like let's say you're thinking about baseball and you want your team to win the World Series and you're thinking, we're going to win, which means they have to lose.
Yeah.
And you could get into this zero sum mindset.
Mindset's different.
And you want to destroy them.
Right.
But that's not a positive sum mindset, because you could say, well, look, sportsmanship, may the best man win. We're going to play our best. They're going to play their best. We talked about the Olympics last time. Same kind of idea. And it's not just that one game. You want to create this ethos and the sportsmanship ethic to where people want to see more games and they want to play more games. And then you have a positive sum thing where everyone is, the players themselves are having a good game, and then the spectators watching are enjoying the game. And there's more games in the future. And which kind of leads to the next idea I want to talk about, but maybe we can dwell on this iteration idea. So you want to have a positive sum game, and you want to have an iterative game that that benefits all people involved. And it's interesting because, and the example I'm trying to give here is where it's based on mindset, because you could argue that baseball is a zero sum game, but your mindset can shift, and that's where we get sportsmanship. This idea, this ethic, is that is the positive sum mindset. I'm repeating myself.
Yeah, no, but it helps reinforce it in my mind. I'm just trying to think of. I like the idea. It sounds great. I think there's something to be said for real competition. Like I'm going to do better than you, and having that, or this is a more positive way to put the same thing. Is I'm going to offer a better product than you.
Yeah.
That people will want more because it brings more value to them.
Yeah.
Now that's still a pretty competitive kind of. I'm going to take the customers.
Yeah.
But that can still lead to a much better progress in terms of the way we live life and, comfort of living and things like that.
Yeah, and you could argue that the positive sum comes from society. And I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but Jimmy said something that I found really interesting. We were talking at Disneyland one day, and I was asking him about his views on capitalism. It's always stuck with me. He said, capitalism is a system where greedy people are motivated to create products and services that benefit the rest of society.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because, a lot of people defend capitalism like it's some, virtuous, perfect, like
right.
utopian ethic. And, the communists say, oh, it's evil, it's satanic, it's destructive.
Right.
But this is a really pragmatic view that says, you know what? Some people are selfish and they operate out of selfish motives. And this capitalist system harnesses that motive pragmatically to help other people.
Yeah.
I thought that's genius.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's not just some people, though. I think that selfish kind of thing is pretty deep and universal in a lot of human beings and cultures. And just in evolution in general. So I don't think this capitalist system is just harnessing some small subgroup of greedy people to do well.
Well, so a couple things. I hear what you're saying for sure. And but getting back to your previous point that there's a value to competition.
Yes.
Because it drives people to do more, do better, but also drives prices down. And so you want to have higher quality and lower prices, and that expands the pie for everybody.
Yeah. And it motivates the companies doing it to be more efficient, to find the better way to do it that's cheaper, more efficient. So it's not the customers are doing well, but to compete in a capitalist system, you need to find a way to make it just as good at lower the cost or whatever.
And the second point is this selfishness thing. You could even call it selfishness instinct. That's kind of the language that Dawkins uses. Yeah. There's an aspect of that, and it's important to remember that people can be very altruistic, and that we also have a group, like tribal identity and instinct, but also an altruistic instinct too. So it's both. Like there's selfishness, but also altruism.
Yeah, I think the important point to make is there's not like some people who are altruistic and some people are selfish. It's a mix within every individual, and that's like what was the famous there's a line between good and evil, and inside everyone, and then
that runs through every human heart.
Yes, yes. So that's the kind of idea I'm trying to say. Is like it's you can't say that no one like selfishness doesn't exist, or maybe we've conquered it in some way, but just realize that's a natural part of kind of the human development in our brains right now. And a system like capitalism can utilize that in a positive way. It's like what Jimmy was saying.
Yeah. And part of that comes from competition in terms of like sports. This idea that, people who are athletes keep getting better and better and better because they're competing with each other.
Yeah.
And same thing with business, right? They get better and better and better because they're competing with each other. And you could argue the same thing ideally in like higher education when you have only so many slots for, PhD students or admittances to these top tier colleges.
Right.
That competition continually raises the bar.
Yeah. Well, there's a good example that I know of when it comes to like internet service providers. So in different areas and different cities, what you have in your area in terms of what kind of internet you can get is usually pretty limited. And I don't know how true this is, but I think some of these companies have kind of like split up territories and basically not offering the best that there is because we can get a lot with what we already have there, and if there's no competition, if you're not going to fight with me and I'm not going to fight with you, we're not going to offer better products. We can just keep getting money for the same amount with um, um, a lower cost to them. Mm-hmm. And so what Google did, or what it was, I forgot how many years ago, they tried to do this thing called Google Fiber. So they're not like in the like AT&T or like Cox or Comcast business, but they think they started in a few cities where they offered this like blazing fast internet just as a test. And also the idea is once people got used to it and liked it, it would like prompt these other companies like, oh crap, like someone's offering really good service now and it's out there, and it's kind of prompting them to like up their game. Mm-hmm. But without some catalyst, if these companies are just milking the teat, for example, that's not good. Mm-hmm. I don't know what other countries, but there's countries in maybe Europe or I don't know where else, but their internet's like ridiculous. And basically, you know, the United States is like the tech capital of the world with Silicon Valley. We got internet, but because of these kind of weird market incentives, it doesn't seem to be progressing as quickly here for some reason. But anyways, that was just a long expounded example to pretty much reiterate what we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, and then the other side of the coin is like, you know, what happens to all the people who aren't competing at the highest level? What do they do with their lives?
Yeah.
And there's sort of two things where, you know, we don't have probably talked about this last time too. We don't have a free market when it comes to water. Mm-hmm. And the idea is we don't want like boom and bust cycles for water because it's so necessary. And there's arguably something similar with education, where, you know, some people argue for free market education. The counter argument is, well, if you have a school that goes under after 2 years, like an average business does, like what happens to those kids? They just miss like 3 years of their education.
Yeah. Or they get displaced to somewhere else, a new environment, which can be disruptive to their education.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a too big to fail thing where people aren't willing to risk like 2 or 3 years of their kids' education or the system, whatever. So they just stick with something that's maybe inefficient and not quite as good in a free market sense, but it's stable and predictable and good enough.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know. I think I know there's a push for, I think we did talk about education, I think a little bit ago with like charter schools that are now becoming more popular.
Vouchers.
Yeah, I think I talked about that like thing in Ohio where the kids were actually getting paid for their grades, like a test room, like those kinds of things. I don't know. It's something definitely needs to be done with the education system. And I don't know if privatizing it's the answer, but it's an interesting one. I have heard that the internet has now become so widely used and basically required for our standard of living that the internet should no longer be a privatized kind of thing, but a utility like power and water and stuff like that. And that's maybe where internet should be going in terms of how it's managed. Yeah, rather than, you know, buying from Cox or from AT&T or whatever, Comcast. Here, it's like you got Edison, and that's just where you live, and that's it. But it's managed, I think, by California in some way to make sure it's playing fair, but guarantees some level of service.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. And that's fundamentally, I think, the divide between like pure like free market capitalism and you know, help everybody out socialism is, you know, we got to have something for the people, and you know, making sure we have food, shelter, healthcare, education, and then, you know, let the luxury brands compete for, you know.
Right. And so like, let's say the internet was become like a utility where it's available to everyone. It's just some basic standard. It doesn't mean you can't go out and buy like the new fancy luxury one that someone's offering.
Yeah. And isn't Elon Musk doing some like Skylink thing?
Yeah, he's got a lot of satellites that he's been. I mean, that's why one of the reasons he built rockets, SpaceX is to get these satellites up there to provide global high-speed internet.
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I don't know how fast it is, but yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing where pushing boundaries and entering markets,
Or creating a market.
creating markets to push things forward to improve the quality of life. And then if other people start getting in there, like Bezos now has his own like rocket company too. And, you know, I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but I'm happy we're getting back into space because it's been a while.
Yeah,
Since we've actually done that.
well, it's interesting too because like a lot of the original space race was driven by the Cold War.
Competition.
Yeah, the U.S. was competing with the Soviet Union,
Right.
and then once the Cold War ended, it seemed like the drive to go into space kind of petered out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so now that Bezos and Musk are competing, now it's on.
Yeah. Right. And hopefully that doesn't involve potential nuclear war between those two. But I'm sure they could devastate our economy if they wanted to. But anyways, yeah. So there is some place for competition, and I think it's great if you can have a way where it's positive and positive sum, and everything. But there is the yin and the yang. There's the other kind of darker side, which does have some place. I think maybe it's in the amount and in which context those things are best in concert.
What do you mean by darker? Like Machiavellian greed, or
No, like I'm gonna make a better product. I'm gonna outsell this guy because they're gonna want my product more because it's cheaper and it does more things and it's better.
Mm-hmm.
And my product is better than him.
Yeah.
And if there's 1,000 people and 900 people buy my thing and only 100 people buy his thing, that's technically a zero-sum kind of thing. So that's all I'm saying. It's like that kind of competition, or the competition between the Soviets and the United States. This was I'm gonna maybe it's not I'm gonna like destroy you or like sabotage you. When you get into that realm, that's not good. But I'm going to be better.
Yeah.
I'm going to make the better thing and do it better, faster, more efficient, cheaper. I will be better at you at this thing. That's still gotta
like outperform.
Yeah. But that still has a darker side to it.
When you break someone's knees.
No, that's sabotage. I'm saying that desire, want, or need, that competitive attitude. And the other guy's not going to be, oh, good job, thanks for beating me.
They might. I mean,
if their livelihood depends on it, and money and things, probably not.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's tricky because usually the ultra competitive people are at such a level that the average person can't even comprehend.
And at that level, it's understanding risks and being able to afford to take risks of different magnitudes.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking about like Olympic athletes, like the amount of training that they could, like, it's literally their entire life is training and exercising and optimizing, and like the average person can't even comprehend what it's like to even get there.
Yeah.
And so I imagine once you're there, you have an unspoken respect for people who are even entering the arena with you. Like, what it costs to even be there.
Right.
So even if somebody else wins, there's this understood respect. And you could call it sportsmanship if you want.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And it's like I see the drive in you, you see the drive in me, and we're both, aiming for the best.
Absolutely. So I guess I just want to make sure there wasn't a confusion is that just the fact of wanting to be the best, to be the best out there, that is not a selfish or kind of negative thing. I think that can be very positive. Making an argument for it, at least.
Yeah. And then the other topic I wanted to bring up is the idea of a finite game versus an infinite game.
Okay.
And there's a book on it, and I know Hormozy talked about this, and I really like this idea. So usually when you have a game, there's an objective, there's a goal, and there's a set of rules, and like chess, right? You want to capture the king, and there are rules about how the pieces move, and then out of the goal and the rules, you organically develop strategies to win the game. And So the idea is you have these finite games which have a specific goal, a specific set of rules, and you win or you don't. That's just how the finite game works. Now, an infinite game is a game that has rules that are perhaps changing, a landscape that is changing, maybe the goal itself is changing, and really what happens is you play the game to stay in the game. And the examples that Hormozy gave was your marriage, right? You don't just get married and say, okay, we're done.
Game over.
Yeah. It's just constantly improving, constantly evolving connection that you have with people. And he says the same thing with your health, right? You're just constantly trying to improve your health. Or business, right? You're constantly trying to improve and optimize your business.
Yeah.
And so in that case, or even a country, right? You want your country to constantly improve. So the point is not to arrive and say we're done. The point is to continue playing the game, to continually improve and continually play the game.
Right. From listening to that, there's some things I saw some similarities. So maybe in the finite game, which is like chess or something, that one seems more like the zero-sum opponent kind of thing, where this infinite game that you're describing seems more of like a goal for for yourself, or maybe your people close to you to attain to. You're not like fighting an opponent necessarily. Is that fair? Or maybe
it could be. I mean, like,
those just the examples that we were.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, like, I mentioned business, and now that I'm thinking about it, yeah. So like, if from that mindset, you're not trying to compete with other people. You're just trying to do the best you can in your lane, right? It's like, here's where I was, and I'm going to go here next, and then I'm going to go here next. What's everyone else doing? I don't know, but I'm constantly improving in my domain.
Right. Or what did we do last quarter that helped us? Let's do that again. What hurt us? And figuring those things out. And what those things are not like known to the game until, the universe is, I guess, coming in and impacting in ways you don't expect. And that's what makes it infinite. Like there's no boundaries like a chessboard has bounds.
Yeah, so there's no, like, the rules can be changing, and there's no, like, specific end. And so the goal isn't to have a specific goal. The goal is just continually improving, or making the game attractive enough to continue playing and continue improving.
So I know last time I think we also mentioned Clicker Heroes.
Oh yeah.
So is that an infinite game?
Yes.
I think you can, but it's like it's a finite game, but it just never ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's like taking the, tail to tip and like dominoes, where it's like it ends, begins, it ends and begins. And maybe a lot of things like that can happen in life. I mean, your degree is kind of segmented like that. You graduate high school, then what? Okay, then you get your 4-year degree, then what? Then you go on to graduate school.
Yeah.
And then maybe there are like course corrections along the way.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because now I'm thinking maybe when I'm like working on a research project, right? That's like the goal, but to get there, you still have to chop that up into pieces and kind of make little mini games for yourself to keep going up. It's not just like one giant leap.
Yeah. And another thing Hormozy said, which I really like, is when you find your game, figure out what the input-output equation is, and then just maximize the input. So, for example, if you're a novelist, right, you need to type words, right? That's what you do. And this is what Stephen King does. Like, he just disciplines himself to just write all the time. And, if you're a salesperson and you get money from the number of prospects you do, just, 10x the number of outreach calls you make. And then you should 10x your income. Actually, it's more than that, because you get better as you go. So he was just saying, figure out what the inputs are and then just crank those. And so in academia, right, the main thing is papers. Figure out, okay, what goes into writing a paper, and just crank out as many papers as you can. And you probably know people like this, or at least have heard of people like this.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that kind of thought, because then it makes you focus on like what's the optimal input.
Yeah,
to get
what's
my
most
output.
productive? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just like I mean, one input could give you some output, but maybe a different input could give you much larger output. So why waste your time on this one?
Right.
You can just dump all in on this.
Yeah, or I think of, rats with cocaine levers. It's like you have 5 different levers. It's like this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Maybe not the best analogy, but yeah, you figure out which one is the best for you. And
or what about like, I find that between the hours of 3 and 7, I can just hammer out work like crazy.
Yeah.
So if you have any work to do, or if you're scheduling something, don't schedule something in 3 to 7. And that's when you're going to be working, because you maximize that, and then make space for that, allowances for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have the most productive time to be doing the most productive stuff.
Yeah.
And
don't be doing your laundry when you could be like, that's like you're wasting that time in a more maximal output kind of way. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's very systems-esque, and I like general systems, inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
Circuits.
Right. Yeah, and so your labor and focus as a specific type of input. It's a really cool idea. And he does everything research based too. So he's like, okay, what are all the things? Here are the inputs, and then the metrics. What are the outputs? And then once you figure that, then just go for it.
Cool.
Yes, I hope you all find this very valuable, because I wish I knew this when I was 20.
Yeah. What specifics, like figure out what works well for you and just like devote yourself to that thing? Or
we have the goal first, and then you figure out what the central thing is that you should be focusing on. So like in academia, like once you know the game is to publish papers, like that just organizes everything that happens in academia.
Right.
Like you go to talks and you have online events, and maybe you're part of a club and you go to like a brown bag meeting and you talk about, the alumni club, and it's like there's all that stuff and it has its place, but it
doesn't help with the publishing of the papers.
That's right. No. And if you don't know that, you can kind of just get lost in everything that's going on. But once you figure out, okay, this is why we're here, then you can really dial in and focus on that thing.
Right.
And like you were saying too, you could like make sure that's done first. It's the top priority, and then maybe do the other stuff.
Right. Yeah. And if that's what you want to do is make papers, that's a great way to do it. And they can be very productive at labs, but it's also pretty stressful. And there can be some issues with those kinds of labs too. More like human level, which I think is the case for industry and businesses too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's useful too, because like it just helps you cut through, I don't want to say nonsense, but like what is potentially nonsense, and that level of clarity is just so satisfying to me.
Absolutely. Cool. So what is the limitation of game theories? Or like thinking of things about games? Because it seems like you can apply it to almost anything.
Oh yeah. So the big one is economics. So a lot of economic theories assume that the individual operates out of rational self-interest, and that we do these logical calculations and budgeting and what we're going to buy. But it turns out human beings are highly psychological, and we have all sorts of emotional and personal reasons for our economic habits and purchases. So in that sense, the completely rational game player assumption breaks down.
Absolutely. At least on the individual level. I don't know how these simulations or stats go, but I think I've heard of some arguments where like on a population level, the behaviors are still acting in these as like rational agents.
Sounds like psychohistory. That's Isaac Asimov's theory in the Foundations theories. I think you're familiar with this.
Yes, of course, yeah. I think it's beyond just like populations, but it's very much deterministic. Basically, if you can calculate every atom and people's behavior, you can predict exactly what's going to happen in the future. And so he predicted like a cataclysm. I'm not going to, spoiler alert. So there was like a cataclysm, and then he's trying to meddle a little bit based on like this the mathematical calculation of determining what the future will hold.
Well, this is not a spoiler. It's actually the backstory.
Okay.
So he predicted this collapse, and it would take something like, I don't know, 10,000 years for civilization to recover.
Mm-hmm.
So he came up with this idea called the Foundation that was going to like store all the knowledge of humanity and try to like speed run through the Dark Ages.
Right, 1,000 years.
Yeah, just like crunch it down. Yeah.
Right.
And but so anyways, the central idea is that you can't predict what an individual is going to do, but you at a grand scale you can predict what humanity is going to do. And I don't even know if that's... See, the problem with that is called the Black Swan theory. So there's a guy named Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He has a book called The Black Swan. And so a black swan, well, in nature, it's this ultra rare thing that you never see. Like most swans are white.
Yeah.
But just like an albino, every once in a while, it's like, what is that thing?
Right.
And so what that represents is something that's completely unpredictable that just changes the course of history. It's similar to the butterfly effect, but it's like 9/11, right? That seemed like this moment that nobody was expecting, and it just shifted the course of history.
Yeah, no one was expecting it because there was incomplete information. This is what I took from the Asimov book. And if you're able to like do that, but even the Black Swan, there's a quantum tunneling effect that causes a gene mutation. So there's like a physical thing that could produce that Black Swan.
Well, the Black Swan's a metaphor, and it just means there are predictably things that you can't predict.
Okay.
Like, unless you're a conspiracy theorist, like some people think 9/11 was an inside job, or COVID lab leak was.
So you can put like some kind of probability on something if you can predictably predict like an unpredictable thing. So that's like now it's like a 10% chance, or you get some kind of distribution.
So usually what happens is historians and social psychologists will take the past and they'll say, okay, look at these patterns in the past, and we're going to project what's going to happen in the future. But the problem is, the further you go into the future, the less likely the outcome is, because there's so much unexpected stuff there. But usually what happens is there's something unexpected, and then the historians of the future look back and say, oh yeah, there's this bigger pattern that we didn't see. So then let's extrapolate into the future.
Right. And increasing the complexity and sophistication, perhaps.
Yeah. But so anyways, the Black Swan idea is that there are these random things that have massive outsized effects that nobody predicted.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody saw this coming in the paradigm or the prediction scheme.
Right. Okay, so I'm sorry, I kind of side railed you on this because this is also a different topic I really like. But we were talking about how game theory isn't necessarily fit for some kind of economics.
So
because there's like individual psychology that plays a lot bigger role. Yeah. And then what I said is, well, maybe you could argue that these populations could behave even more as rational agents if you look at the mean distribution of the kinds of decisions that are made. I don't know if that's true, but I'm saying I could imagine something like that.
Yeah, or like corporations, right? These collective intelligence in a corporation, and like you have the articles of incorporation, which is sort of like the programming of the artificial intelligence that guides how the thing operates, or like the founding documents of a country and its values can kind of tell it where to go and how it reacts. But the complexity is just off the chart, like these countries are super interconnected and businesses are super interconnected, and the prediction becomes really chaotic, if not impossible.
Yeah, I think with current technology, for sure, I think it's feasible. It's just within the realm of possibility to start not getting 100% picture, but get pretty darn close to being accurate with some of these predictions, is my guess. I'm more of a determinist when it comes to these sorts of things.
Rather than a oh, is it a chaos theorist?
Yeah.
Is it Ian
Chaos
Malcolm?
theory. Yeah.
The drop. Which way will it go down your knuckle?
Yeah. Well, that's the black swan thing, right? You can't predict it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yeah. So individual psychology can influence economics. They can do totally irrational things. And a lot of times in businesses, that's actually that's more what they're playing to, is the psychology of the person now, at least more modern, rather than like, this will bring you value because you can save 10% on this, and this is why it's good for you.
Well, it's interesting. So I took this online marketing course, and one of the things they said, which is really interesting, is if you're marketing to a business, you want to be as logical and as rational as possible, right? What's your return on investment? Like, how much are you putting in? How much do you expect to get out? And just lay out the numbers as rationally as possible. The presumption is that the purpose of a business is to make money, and they're going to be using as logic as much as possible. But if you're selling to the public, if you're selling to individuals, you want to understand what are their needs, what are their wants, what's their past, what are their problems, and you make it as personal as possible.
Right.
And like the more concern, care, empathy, and like valuing them as a person and giving service to them as a person, that's how you make the sale with an individual.
Yeah. Or you put some celebrity in there who's very attractive model type of person, and do all sorts of other marketing to like really get at the psychology of this person to sell them something.
Well, so the interesting thing about that, like marketing, it's not really sales, right? You're just like putting it into the public consciousness, and then they're like at the supermarket and saying, I think I'd like a Coke.
Yeah.
Like no one's sitting there saying, buy Coke, buy Coke.
Right.
But like they themselves make the choice, but their choice has been influenced by this broadcast advertising.
Yeah. And there's just some...
So I guess it's a third type of marketing.
Right. There's some marketing that is just also just gets ingrained to your brain so much that you don't... It's surprising. Like there was a cough drop ad for like Ricola.
Oh yeah. Yeah, with the horns.
Yeah. Right. The fact that I can remember that, and I don't know, I just saw a giant horde and I made like a Ricola joke and everyone was laughing.
Yeah.
Like we all knew what that was. And that's like, that is some crazy marketing.
That's really good. Yeah, like you've taken over the culture.
Yeah, exactly. Make some joke. I know a lot of the newer ads have like a lot of humor in it.
Yeah.
Like Geico and those kinds of things.
Well, and the new marketing is when you can create a meme that goes viral that promotes your product.
Right. That's
the holy grail. Yeah. Because it's essentially free word of mouth marketing, but also has this like freight of like cultural like staying power or being memorable.
Yeah. And once it starts, it's just like it self-perpetuating. It's not costing you anything.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I know the master of that is probably Mr. Beast, because he has these viral videos that he makes, and he had this one about like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory where they went through a competition,
right?
And then he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm coming up with my own brand of chocolate."
Ah, okay.
Mr. Beast Feastables, and you can buy them at Walmart.
Very clever. Didn't the winner like win the factory itself?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that, but that's pretty awesome.
Very clever, for sure.
Okay, so you can't necessarily assume every actor in a game is going to act rationally to maximize this game theory thing. So there are some... You need to be careful when you apply this.
Right. So game theory proper is part of mathematics, which is like completely rational and like, So yes, you have to be careful that you don't model your world on this and like use it in very specific contexts.
Right. It's like there's average Joe player, and then there's like HAL 1000, and them going at each other on this game probably isn't going to be kind of this game theory model, assuming everyone's a HAL 1000.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this in the metaphors. Like if someone's obsessed with game theory, then they can take the metaphor a little too far and view everything as a game that's purely rational.
Yeah. So I think that's a because it's tempting for me when I see something like that. It's like, oh, can we predict the weather with game theory? Or it's like with things that obviously don't have like a good application.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tempting. So it seems good when there's like I've heard of like politics and like geopolitical things being modeled by game theory, some kind of economics for sure. But there are some things that maybe it's not suited for. What are some other like applications of game theory that you know of?
Definitely business, economics.
Probably some evolution stuff.
Right. I was thinking mating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or yeah, optimizing resources and a lot of this, collaboration, competition stuff.
Right. Like if you over predate your food, you're gonna end up getting screwed. So
right.
Maybe there's some balance that they found.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting too, because you can set up the model and then you run the model and then compare it with reality. And like, hey, that matches reality, so that means it's a pretty good model.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you make your model, it looks nothing like reality. Okay, that's definitely not a good model.
Yeah, I think they call that face validity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if it makes logical sense, then you can use it. But if you're like trying to fit something that's kind of weird in there, maybe it's not a valid model.
Well, we used to play this game called Life. Remember the cells that like multiply?
Oh, you mean on a computer?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you end up with like these things that just go back and forth.
That's right. There were these stable organisms.
Yeah.
And you could think, oh, well, look, these things are evolving and then they create life forms. It's like, well, they're operating according to the rules of this system. And it just so happens that when you have these simple rules and you expand them out, you have these configurations that are stable.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't necessarily prove evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
But it's interesting and to think about.
Definitely. It was a pretty cool demonstration because you could set them up in such a way to have these crazy waves go back and forth and like spiral around. It looked organic.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was like this digital thing creating this like organic with simple rules.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really neat. Okay. How you think we're getting good to conclude here pretty soon?
I'm probably going to think of like 2 or 3 things later tonight.
We can do episode 3.
We can.
On games.
We can.
There's nothing stopping us.
Yeah, true. Because last time we were talking about like board games and video games and the play instinct and kind of a developmental sense.
Yeah. So maybe we can go back into the like.
And now we're talking more like adult.
We're talking, how the world works.
Right. Economics and politics and power and money. And
right. So as you're developing then, these games are important. So last time we talked about playing like House or whatever. It's like a simulation of what you might expect when you become an adult. And it's a safe place to do this thing until... and then lots of other things. Yeah,
and you could also argue using this new language, like that's an infinite game. When you're playing House, there's no explicit goal, but just you're kind of like learning by doing the thing.
Right. So you're playing House, and then like the neighbor bully kid comes in and said, "I'm the bad guys. I'm gonna come in and take your money or something."
Right.
They mess up your little game because it's an infinite game. You can't control that.
Yeah. Another thing too that's really interesting, kind of getting back to this like game theory, like perfect math simulation that doesn't quite jive in the real world, is probability and statistics. So a lot of people have like their intuition about probability is off. And it's actually not that their intuition about probability is off. It's that the probability that they're looking at comes from a probability machine, meaning it's something that humans have artificially engineered to do random things, like a roulette wheel or dice. Right? These things don't exist in nature.
Right.
And so, like, our natural intuition is that, okay, like, if a woman is 8 months pregnant, she doesn't have a baby in the next week, she's going to have it soon. If that doesn't happen, it's going to happen really soon.
Right.
But when you're gambling and you don't win, it's like, okay, I'm going to win soon. And then you lose. No, I'm going to win soon.
Gambler's fallacy.
Exactly.
No.
But it's not so much there's a gambler's fallacy. It's that your intuition is adapted to nature, not these artificial gambling or randomness machines.
Yeah. So you really have to utilize your rationality to beat out those kinds of things.
Right.
You can't rely on your intuition for that.
Right. Or another way to think about it, like this game was rationally created, so you need to have like rationality to understand and manage the game.
Yeah. There's a really, since we're talking about this, is a good place to put this in. There's these AI models from OpenAI. I think one's called ChatGPT.
Right.
So it's a large language model with human guidance or human. It's something where it's trained by humans, so that when you interact with this, it seems more natural. And what was really interesting is that when they just had the ChatGPT large language model without the human training, and if you asked it probabilities on stuff, it would give you the rational percentage probabilities. But after they trained it on interacting with humans for long periods of time, it was actually making errors on probability estimates that tracked with the human intuition. So basically, you're making this large language model like assimilate some of these like
more human
probability intuitions, even though they're incorrect. So it was an interesting debate on like, okay, these, we're training these EIs to be more easily interacting with humans, but now inherently we're putting in some flaws when it comes down to. So just be careful what you want them to do. Don't have them write maybe a math proof. If they don't.
Well, they do write code.
They do write code. You gotta double check it. But anyways, I thought that was a fascinating example to where even these computer models, when they model human interaction, also have these false intuitions you can't rely on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We good?
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, I thought you wanted to also talk about the whole like human development and how games can.
I was just trying to connect and call back to what we did before, just to kind of give like a broad overview, because you have like games when you're a kid, and then like adolescent, and then adult, and then you have like science, and then this whole like spectrum of games.
But they can influence also the kind of person you become. We talked a little bit about Ultima last time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to go into more of that or.
Oh, like personally.
Yeah.
So I got exposed to this game called Ultima 6. I think I linked it. Yeah, I did link it last time. And after the episode, I was just reflecting on how profound an impact this game had on me, because like kids play like imagination games, and this game just got a hold of me, and I would like, create plots that I would act out. This is like before D&D. Like we were essentially doing like what you call a live action role playing game, but we didn't have like strict rules. It was kind of like intuitive storytelling. And we also played this game called Hero's Quest, and I just borrowed a lot of that from Ultima 6. And
well, Hero's Quest had like some like already predetermined stuff, but it allowed you to make your own adventure.
That's right.
And you kind of like synergize a little bit with the Ultima.
For sure. Yeah. And it was funny because we mentioned it last time, and I didn't realize how influential that game was in my life. And I just thought about all the things that that connected to and flowed from that game. It like opened my imagination in a way that I didn't really recall or appreciate, I guess. Look, with time, I can really see how that impacted me.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens to a lot of people too. I'm trying to think of games that have had that impact on me. I don't know if I can, honestly, off the top of my head. Yeah, I guess in terms of like playing things out in real life and that role-playing aspect, I don't know. I think I was more in awe of what you were doing and just kind of like wanted to tag along. I thought everything was so cool and imaginative. We even had like, we'd use like broomsticks as staves and stuff.
Yeah.
Casting spells.
Well, right. And we had like this elemental thing. So like Earth had a wand, and the water had this like water orb. And and then there were like characters and like mysteries to solve. I mean, it's essentially D&D before D&D was a thing.
Yeah, no, it was pretty extravagant. And I know that even the neighbor kids wanted to come over and play.
That was fun.
Right? It was just like, it was an attractive thing. If only you could have monetized it back then.
Right?
You'd be a millionaire by now.
Exactly.
Everyone coming over to play Josh's plots. Cool. All right. Well, maybe that's a good place.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And remember,
Always be
always be curious.
See you guys.